Don, would you tell us about your publishing career and where it started?
Started with a novel called Cold River. That was 1962. And the next thing that I wrote was a novel about the Vietnam War, and there had been two of those. And the two most recent books, which are published by Random House, are The Fearless Man, about the Vietnam War, and A Common Ordinary Murder. And those came out in, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago. A Common Ordinary Murder was published by Random House.
Don, your writing career stretches over a fairly long period of time. Your first novel came out in 1962.
Right.
And could you talk a little bit about how your writing and maybe your approach to writing, how those have shifted over the decades?
My approach is the same in that I have a philosophical viewpoint. I don't mean to say that I push it in my writing, but it certainly informs my writing. And that's the same as the first novel. In terms of presentation or style, the big change is that I moved more towards the dramatic. I'm writing novels, but I write them in scenes. And I don't mean that there's no narrative voice. There is a narrative voice. But for example, in No Blue-Eyed Devil, it's what I call a novel of a single action unfolding. It begins with a catastrophe. The energy discharged by the catastrophe, in this case the beating to death of young John Shipman Jr. by white cops, is the energy that propels the entire novel all the way to the last scene.
As a former journalist, do you see that experience filtering into your fiction work?
Yes, I do, because I spent 19 or 20 years as a reporter, and a lot of that was on the street. I covered a fair amount of crime and a fair number of trials, mostly politics, but also it's not something you do sitting around an office. You got to get out there. So that's one thing. That's my equivalent of the PhD that some people get when they think they want to be writers. They get a PhD. Doesn't interest me. As Herman Melville said, the sea was my Harvard College and my Yale. Now, even though I went to Harvard College, that's my attitude. I did an awful lot of research for No Blue-Eyed Devil. If you can call it riding around with cops,
yep.
That was research. What happened was that in Milwaukee, a kid named Ernest Lacey was beaten to death by the Milwaukee cops. I was sitting in the newsroom one day. I was one of the reporters, one of many reporters that covered the street demonstrations that followed that killing. But the main guy on the story for the Milwaukee Journal was a guy named Greg Stanford, a black guy whose desk was across the aisle from mine. I was writing a story one day, and I saw a distinguished-looking older black man dressed in a business suit and tie walk into the newsroom, and Gregory Stanford greeted him and took him to his desk. And I thought, I'll bet that man is Ernest Lacey's father. So after Greg Stanford had concluded his interview or whatever it was, and escorted that man out to the elevator, and he came back, I said, Gregory, who was that guy? He said, that's Ernest Lacey's father. And I thought, what is his life like? What is the rest of his life like? They have killed his kid. What is he going to do? What can he do? And the next thing was, what about the cop who killed him? Cop or cops who killed him? What happens to them?
Was that the moment when you decided to write?
Yes, that very friggin' moment. And then I called my brother in Dayton, who was a lawyer in Dayton. That's our hometown. And I said, can you get me a place riding with cops in the worst district in Dayton? And he said, I'll call you back. So my brother Steve called me back and he said, call a guy named Commander Riley at the Dayton Police Department. I called Commander Riley. And he said, well, I have to talk to you. So I went to Dayton, talked to him, and I talked to the chief, Tyree Broomfield, a black man. And I said, I don't want to write journalism about your department. I'm writing fiction. I won't mention the name Dayton. Nobody will know what city I'm writing about. He said, fine. He said, how much do you want? I said, I want 3 weeks, 7 nights a week. I went back twice, and I did eventually 48 nights in Dayton and 3 in Cleveland.
Well, choosing to approach the theme of racism in a novel is always, I think, a very difficult choice to make because it's such a loaded topic. Did you go into that area, an arena, with any trepidation, or did you feel completely confident with it?
Well, I did with a lot of trepidation because I could see a black reader reading this book and saying, what does this guy know? You know, he's a white blue-eyed devil. What does he know? And I don't write as if I understood what it is like to be on the receiving end of racism, because I haven't been. But I did, but there is a certain picture that you get if you look objectively at human behavior. And I covered civil rights for the Hartford Courant, the Milwaukee Journal, the Washington Star, and I guess that's all. I spent several years in my career as a reporter covering civil rights. You learn something. You don't learn how to be a black man. I didn't feel I had to be a black man to write this book about race relations. Somebody's got to write a book about white cops and black citizens.
And then in the decision to join with the Concord Press and be on our first list with the title, formerly Temple and Shipman, now No Blue-Eyed Devil, talk a little bit about the decision to go with the Concord Press, in that, you know, we're a very non-traditional press. You've been published by Random House, you've been published broadly. Choosing to be part of a radical outfit like ours, you know, what was behind that choice?
Well, it's not because I'm much of a radical. I'm a great admirer of the Concord Free Press and what you and Ann are doing in the Concord Free Press. And I see the connection between the E-Press and the Free Press as something that's worth being involved in. So I just thought it looked like a really great possibility to open this novel, No Blue-Eyed Devil, to a new audience.
Good. The thing about having it out as an ebook is now it's available to a broad audience, and they can download it in minutes, which is to me the amazing thing. You know, we're a collective of writers. We're not publishers, as I always tell people. So we're all, you know, writers of various stripes. But so we think about publishing from an author's perspective, and putting myself in your shoes. What it means is this book is available. And it's available instantly, and it's back in print forever.
I remember the first novel I published, the editor was a man who's now a friend of mine named John Pope at St. Martin's Press, a very smart guy who was very attentive to what I was trying to do with that book and was helpful without being terribly intrusive or arrogant. And then the next editor I had was a woman named Ann Kostick at Seaview Books. Same story, intelligent application of her intellect and aesthetic to my work. Then at Random House, the legendary Bob Loomis, who had been around for about 50 years, same thing. He read the books, and he read them critically. And I didn't agree with everything he wanted me to do, and I didn't do everything he wanted me to do. But every once in a while, he would say, this doesn't look right to me. What's wrong with it? And I would say, well, what do you think is wrong with it? He would say, I don't know. What do you think? And anyhow, you get the picture. In other words, conscientious editors. I suppose you can still find them in New York. I'm hoping to find a conventional publisher for my next novel. But if I do, it's gonna be a piece of luck, I think.
A lot of people in your shoes who have written a lot find themselves, you know, sort of daunted by the whole thing, or missing the good old days when you actually could make a fair amount of advance and get attention. I think the time when a new novel was an event has sort of come and gone. There are so many novels come out so quickly and disappear that really trying to just write because you love to write and because you love to tell a story and because you want to connect, as you said, emotionally to readers. It pulls you back to the core reasons why you write. In terms of what's ahead for your work, you mentioned you're working on some short stories, you've got a novel in progress. Why don't you let people know where you are with what you're doing now?
Well, I've finished a draft of a novel about a woman in her early 30s who has 2 sons. And she lives in Dayton, Ohio, near Wright Field in World War II. Wright Field is a major U.S. Army Air Corps base. And the Army Air Corps sends a guy to her house and says, I noticed you got a nice big house. Could you take a couple of pilots or bombardier navigators?
Billet them or whatever.
Billet them, because we don't have enough barrack space. It's early in the war. It happened to my mother. My mother said yes. And we had Army Air Corps pilots in our house throughout most of the war, until later on in the war.
All right. Well, this has been really great, Don. Thanks for letting me talk.
I enjoyed talking with you, Stona.